Think we've got a couple of people starting to trickle in. Welcome. I can't see who you are or if you're there. The fun of remote conferences. So I think we've got a few more minutes before most people will exit the other sessions, and then we will kick off. We are right at the top of the half hour. I was about to say top of the hour. So we'll give people a little bit of an opportunity to switch over from their other sessions before kicking off. Say hello in the chat if you're here. Would love to see who all has joined and who all is with us today. Hello, JD. We've got Sai. Where are people joining from as well? I know that this is pretty global. I'm sitting here in London, Texas born and bred, migrated to London just before the pandemic, so I had excellent timing. We've got Belgium, Boston, Washington, D.C., South Carolina. Very fun. Toronto, great. We've got everyone East Coast in Europe. Where's our West Coast folk? There we go. We got some Bay Area. All right. Well, we'll go ahead and kick off. I know we've still got some people joining. My name is Emily Tate. I'm managing director of Mind the Product. And we're going to talk about prioritization today. I've been in the product industry for over 15 years now, and prioritization is one of those topics that we talk about all the time. And there are lots of opinions, lots of different ways of doing it. And it's because it's a really hard thing to do. But the thing is, we've been doing prioritization our whole lives. I know when I was a kid, I loved checking things off of lists. My grandmother had one of those like pre-printed notepads that had the little boxes and lines for checklists. And I would go to her house and start by making a list of all the great things I wanted to do with her in that week. So I'd say we want to bake cookies or read a book, and we check that off of the list. And then we bake cookies and check that off the list. And then we had to clean up after the cookies. And I did not want to check that off the list because that's not fun. But the thing that I wanted to do more than anything on that list was to play a game. It was my favorite thing to do. It still is my favorite thing to do. I love playing games. But I would schedule everything out and put that at the bottom of the list. So when we got to the end of the week, I wouldn't have gotten to play my game because we ran out of time. And really, the truth of the matter is, I had my priorities wrong. And when I think about that, that's even a wrong statement, because what I had wrong was my priority. Because the concept of having multiple priorities is a fairly recent concept, and I think is a big piece of why we struggle so much today. In fact, there's a great article that points out a Google Books historical graph of the word priority and priorities, and when they started becoming popular and in use. And if you look at this, the word priorities as a plural actually wasn't even a thing until after 1920, and then really moving into post-World War II era, to where today, now it is about half of the mentions of things in relation to priority. And this makes it really, really difficult for us to focus on the most important thing. As product managers and as product people, or if you're a product-minded founder, one of the most important things that we can do is provide focus for our teams and focus for our products so that we're always focused on the next important thing. When I think about prioritization, I look at two elements of it. It's most commonly talked about within your roadmap, and your roadmap is where you are headed. But it's also really important to think about prioritization in terms of your backlog, because your backlog is how you get there at the end of the day. We have lots of things that we have to consider in prioritization beyond just the big top level roadmap. We've got to think about our feature work, our bugs, our maintenance, our tech debt, the research that we want to do, experiments we want to run. All of this is going into and landing on the same team. So when we think about prioritization, we have to consider it all holistically. So how do you prioritize? If you came here to get the magic bullet framework, I'm sorry to disappoint you, but there isn't one. But it's more about thinking about the philosophy of prioritization and how we approach it. Michael Sippy did a great talk, and he talked about his grand unified theory of work. And he said that his theory of work was make a list of things to do, prioritize that list, do the things on the list in order, and constantly communicate about items 1 through 3. And that is really, really simple, but makes a whole lot of sense. So I have taken that, when I think about prioritization, taken it down a level and said, what is my grand unified theory of prioritization? And it's fairly similar, but with the prioritization flavor. Step 1 is to capture everything. Make a list of everything that you think you might need to do within your product. When I do this, I actually like to take them and prioritize them in their individual categories first. So capture everything, but think about the format in which you're capturing them. This was actually a conversation that I had with a person I was coaching, where they got dinged for not using Jira for all of their communications because it was considered the only tool they needed. Not every tool is fit for purpose. Figure out the best way to capture the things that you're wanting to do. So thinking about the features, write out all your user stories and all the things that you want to build the features for your product. Then think about your bugs and prioritize the worst bug to the least impactful bug, the maintenance or the tech debt or the tech initiatives that you want to drive, research that you want to do, and then a bunch of other stuff, because there is always other stuff that we want to do. Once you have all of these things prioritized in their individual buckets, then combine them. So take your list and say, what is the most important thing to do? What's the next most important thing to do? What's the third most important thing to do? It might not be a story. It might be a bug. It might be a bit of research that needs to happen. And just start to kind of weave these different pieces together till you get your one single prioritized list that your team is going to be working off of. So I know that that sounds really, really simple. And it is really simple. But the thing to remember is that simple does not equal easy. Simple can be really, really difficult because you're having to make trade-offs and you're having to say which thing is the most important at any given time. Prioritization at the end of the day is an art. And we struggle so much with it because we want it to be a science. We want it to be something that can be mastered and accomplished. But it takes a really long time to master, and there's not a single right way to do it. You have to figure out your process of how you get to that question of what is the next most important thing. So for the rest of this time, I want to talk about some do's and don'ts of prioritization to help you think about how you prioritize within your product. So the first, and the thing that I will preach a lot, is don't try to math your way into art. And I'm not saying this because I hate math. In fact, there was a time when I was going to be a math major, and then I started getting pulled into accounting. So I love numbers. I love when things line up and when I can start at the top, solve a problem, and get to an answer. Unfortunately, that is not what prioritization is. So I know the most common thing I get asked is like, well, can't we use a framework? Can't we use something like this balanced scorecard or like RICE or ICE or any of the other kind of named frameworks around prioritization? And you can. The challenge with frameworks like these is they make you think that there is more science to this than there actually is. So when people start to want to use balanced scorecards, they put numbers in that reflect the biases they already have. And this causes you to basically take the responsibility off yourself and let the spreadsheet spit out the correct answer. But that's not really how it works. The other side is there are hundreds of frameworks out there when it comes to prioritization. They all have different uses. They have some that are better than others. But the key is these are all just ways to help us visualize and get a sense of what might be more important than the other. But it doesn't keep you from doing the work in order to validate what should be the most important thing. When you look at scorecards and you look at those kinds of things where you plug in numbers and it gives you a ranked weighted outcome of the most important thing, what you'll find is you can easily make a case where you just change some of those numbers and now it says something completely different. I have been with teams where you started with one group making the prioritization criteria and putting the things in. And of course, it pops out with the thing that they wanted to do as the most important. And then another team takes that same spreadsheet and says, ooh, but we disagree on the score you assigned for value on this one and for reach on this one. And we think that it's not as confident as you think it is. And all of a sudden, this same framework is spitting out a completely different answer. It just codified the biases that we already had. So the thing that you need to do instead is use research and be able to explain your reasoning. There's nothing wrong with using a framework if it helps you frame your own thoughts, hence the name framework. But make sure that it's done with an eye on research and validated information or tested information. Take that confidence score and make it something that your team can rely on to say, this thing is the top of our list because we've done these user interviews, we did these tests, here were the results of those tests, and now that's why this is the most important thing. Use that to help frame your thinking. My next don't is don't prioritize alone. This is something that we can fall into, particularly when we're in startups or smaller companies, or when we don't necessarily want other people's opinions when we're in larger companies. But it's really tempting to say, oh, I'm just going to do the prioritization and I'll present that to the team, or I'll give that to the developers. Prioritizing alone means you're only getting your input. And you need the inputs of all the other functions surrounding you and surrounding your product, as well as the inputs of your customers. Make sure that you're taking in the learnings that you'll have. Otherwise, you are going to have blind spots and you are going to miss things. Do prioritize together. Bring together your marketing person, your engineers, your design team, and especially if you are in a larger B2B enterprise kind of organization, bring the other teams together that have dependencies on you or that you have dependencies on. I used to work in a large B2B organization, and I actually ran prioritization sessions standing next to the two other teams that most closely impacted my product. They were doing their prioritization work, I was doing mine, and then the other team was doing theirs. But because we were doing it at the same time and in the same place, we were able to talk to each other and see how that lined up, what it made, what it meant for my prioritization, that I needed to do something for the other team to be able to be unstuck. So prioritizing with everyone who has an impact on this can really be helpful. Don't let your tools do the talking. Again, the larger the organization you get, the more reliance there's going to be on tools. And what I have found in the consulting work I've done, and as I've coached other teams and teams I've been on myself, is we have this desire to find the perfect tool, and we end up letting it guide our process as opposed to us determining our process and finding a tool to fit it. There are lots of great tools out there. Happy to give recommendations if you have a desire for one. But the most important thing is figure out your process first. Work through your process on sticky notes on a wall or on a mural board or something that's very, very flexible before you then find a tool that will fit your process. I was looking at, when I created this presentation a little while ago, I was looking at some marketing materials for a popular tool in large enterprises called Rally, built by CA Technology. Some of you may use this. If you work for Rally, I apologize in advance. It's a great tool. I've used it in the past. But in their marketing material, they have this section here that says, are you struggling to align your work to the business strategy? Are you missing deadlines, milestones, delivery dates? Do you have too much work in progress with maxed out people? You still cannot deliver anything fast. Are you creating unrealistic development roadmaps? Do you lack visibility into progress and risk before it's too late to act? Those are all really, really great things to think about. None of them can be solved by a tool. They all have to be solved by you and your team doing the work of communication. So instead, think about communication as our job. It is so important that we are constantly communicating out and reporting out the most relevant information and maintaining that level of transparency that we need to get everybody on board, keep everyone aligned, and keep our organization moving forward. Do talk to your stakeholders regularly. Give updates. Be transparent when things are going bad. Be transparent when things are going well, and have the hard conversations. Make sure that you're including those stakeholders in your day-to-day. So my next don't might be the most controversial one that I have. And if you do this differently, that's fine. Do what works for you. But when I talk to people and when I coach, I recommend that they don't just assign a portion of each sprint to different categories. Or its sister problem, don't give others a percentage of your capacity to prioritize independently. So I see this a lot where people will say, I want to be able to avoid the opportunity cost. Or I want to be able to say, I'm going to do 70% feature work, 10% other work, 10% bugs, 10% maintenance. And that's what we're going to put in every iteration, every sprint, every release. Or the other thing I see people do is say, oh, well, marketing wants to be able to prioritize 15% of our roadmap, or biz dev wants to be able to prioritize 10% of our roadmap. And we're going to give them this much time that they can prioritize. And the problem here is that when you start assigning fixed percentages to things, you do have an opportunity cost, and you lose the ability to have the flexibility you need in order to always be doing the next most important thing, which is what we're trying to do when we prioritize. So it may be that one iteration, the most important thing is 70% feature work and 10% each of all the other categories. It could be that we're in a spot where we actually need to do all of that feature work, mostly feature work and a couple of bugs and maybe a little bit of maintenance. It could be that we're in a time where we're doing a lot of research and a lot of experimentation, and actually that's what needs to take up the most space. And it could be that we're in a time where we just need to go fix some bugs. We've got problems. We just need to stop down and go through and fix a lot of things that are going wrong. If you have declared a percentage in advance or given other people the ability to basically own that, you lose the ability to flex within this. Instead, always prioritize the next most important thing. You hear me say that a lot because the more you say it, the more you start to realize that the next most important thing is not at the top of your list, and you can rework it from there. Always prioritize like your budget could go away tomorrow. And I used to say this in consulting, we need to look at if someone said your funding was cut off at the end of this week, is the thing at the top of your list the last thing that you would work on, the last thing that you would finish off? And if the answer to that is no, then it's not the next most important thing. I used to say this hypothetically, and then I worked with a team who actually had the case where they got told your funding is going to be shut down in 2 weeks. And they had to stop down, look at their backlog, and they realized they hadn't been prioritizing the next most important thing. If you only had 2 weeks left, what would they do? And they shifted it around and realized we need to make sure we're prioritizing well. Then new funding came through. It ended up not being a thing, but it was a really good lesson for them to learn. And it has always stuck in my mind as well. Don't squeeze in little things that aren't prioritized. A lot of times when I hear people talking about struggling to get through, to make progress on things, when I ask them about what they have fit in the, kind of the small little things, the one line here, oh, we just need to do this one little thing. It tends to blow up more than you think. And you tend to spend a whole lot more time on those little, less important things than the things that will actually drive your product and your business forward. There is no magic cue where things just don't take up time. It's the same engineers that are working on your features as your bugs, as your maintenance, as, oh, hey, can we just check out this one little thing and pull some data over here? All of that stuff may be important, but it's going to, it is an opportunity cost. It is going to be a trade-off. Something's not going to get done because this other thing did. So add those things to the backlog and decide where they fit. It's not saying don't do them, just do them with intention. And don't avoid hard conversations with stakeholders. I know that I have personally done this in the past, and it has never worked out well, where you know that someone doesn't like the next thing on your list, or they think that something else should be way higher. And it's easy to say, maybe I just won't talk to them as often as I should, or I won't really tell them that their thing is not going to happen. And it only causes problems. So there's a great article by Elizabeth Ayer that says that she talks about the concept of don't ask for forgiveness, radiate intent. This is not saying that you have to hide, you don't want to hide things, and you shouldn't do the, ask for forgiveness, not for permission, but you also don't need to ask for permission. Just tell people what you're doing, showcase that intent, and make sure that transparency will solve a lot of these conversations. You may have to have really difficult conversations about what the priorities are, and how, have conversations about those trade-offs. But it could be that there's information that's brought to the table that changes what you thought was the most important thing. So give people the opportunity to have that input by radiating that intent. Do work towards alignment early and often. Alignment is, in fact, prioritization in general is an alignment tool. It is getting everyone on the same page and saying what the most important thing is. And so getting that alignment early and continuing to have those discussions is super, super important. And finally, don't let maintenance and tech initiatives languish. I always like to put this point in basically anywhere I can make it fit, because I think that as product people, we tend to err on the wrong side of this. There's a thing with when it comes to maintenance, technology, organization, we'll see, we've got kind of feature work and we've got maintenance, and we all know that maintenance is important. What the rest of the business sees is stuff that I can sell and a waste of time and money. And so they want to try to shrink that maintenance budget as much as possible so that they can build the new shiny things that they can go talk to customers about and that they can sell. It's really hard to sell. We spent a couple of weeks upgrading our our development platform, or the back end, the database. But it's very, very important, both in making sure your platform is stable and in keeping your teams happy, because developers don't like working on brittle old systems that are going to be falling apart, and anything they touch is really scary. So as product people, we actually sit in a position where we can be the advocates. We can be the team's advocate to help other parts of the organization at least be okay with doing the maintenance aspects that might not be able to kind of be put into a brochure at the end of the day. To close, when we talk about why this is also messy, I started thinking about prioritization as an art. And this is my watercolor palette. I'm a watercolor painter, and it is not pretty. It's kind of ugly. It's got lots of colors mixed in together and all over the place. And there's colors mixed in with each other in their wells. But the thing is, this is art in itself. And there's something beautiful in that mess, to the point where there are actual full Instagram hashtags of people building out, or people showing off their messy palettes. You'll often see when they put the beautiful picture that they've painted, their messy palette sitting on the side of it, because there is a lot of greatness in that mess that gets you to the final pretty picture. So embrace the messiness of prioritization. Enjoy the process. Enjoy these trade-off conversations and the difficult things that you have to say with your stakeholders, and prioritize your way to greatness. I am really easy to reach. I'm at the Daily M basically everywhere. I'm with Mind the Product. We would love to have you come see some of our content, some of our videos, or join us as a member or at one of our conferences. But I will go ahead and answer a couple of questions. And before I do that, the number one thing that I know people ask is, can I get the slides? And yes, you can. They are going to be right there. So grab that link and you are welcome to use these slides with anything. So we have a couple questions in. Feel free to drop another one in or send me a message later. Ken asked how often to reprioritize. It depends on which level you're talking about. So when I look at backlogs, I would say your sprint cadence is, don't make sure you're reevaluating that at every cadence. My other controversial opinion, because I worked in it and loved it, is I'm actually a big fan of the 1 week sprint as opposed to the longer pieces. And it gives you a chance every week to kind of rethink about, is this the most important thing? I will also say there's a category of whenever is necessary. So if you get halfway through a sprint and stuff has changed, just change it. Don't worry about the rules. With roadmaps, I generally, depending on how quick you develop, but in most organizations, I say you should be looking at it at least every month and making sure that the things in the short term are kind of still where you thought, and then a little bit into your longer term of, are we still, is our vision still going in the right place? So every week to 2 weeks on the backlog, at least every month on your roadmap. And I will also say that doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to start from scratch and have to reprioritize from the beginning. Most of the time, once you've done kind of a big level of prioritization, it's more adjustments. It's more being able to say, does this still make sense? If yes, keep going. If no, do some adjustments. And then a big reprioritization when you have new information that demands it. Can this process coexist with semi-annual planning processes, resulting in a work plan for the next 6 months? Yes, with some caveats. So when I look at the semi-annual planning processes, a lot of times that's in bigger organizations who are looking for some level of certainty and are kind of wanting to predict the future. We can't. I used to do we actually did an annual planning process where we would plan out roadmaps for the entire year and say what we were going to build in each month. Our team built that because we had to, and then we reevaluated it every month and made changes as we needed to. And I went back at the end of the year and looked at what we actually accomplished on that first year roadmap. We did 20% of what we thought we were going to do at the beginning of the year. So that illusion of predictability is not accurate. So to answer your question of how this fits in with it, I would do the semi-annual planning processes as much as you can, rather than getting down into the details of literally every feature that you're going to build. Pull it up a level and try to get to more themes or opportunities that you're going to be working on for that next 6 months. You may have to name them creatively to make them work with your company's processes, or go talk to the people that run those company processes and talk about, we want to try to be flexible in our in our ability to deliver on what the market is telling us. Basically we want to kind of bucket the things into higher level categories. So I can say, used to manage a travel app, I can say I want to improve the traveler experience. And that as kind of a thing that might include 2 or 3 different types of features, but it gives me the flexibility to shift exactly what I deliver based on research and based on the market. How do you prioritize, negotiate an urgent request from an executive for some data or a change if the sprint has already started? It's my favorite phrase. It depends. So I think a couple questions. First is really, how urgent is it? I know a lot of times in organizations, we have there becomes this culture where anything from a C-level or from an executive is immediately treated as urgent. And oftentimes with those people, if you just ask the question of, is this actually urgent or can this wait a week? It's typically not. They recognize that things can wait. And then I would say, if it really is actually urgent, go ahead and do it, but just make sure you actually acknowledge what's not going to be done. And even with that executive, sometimes saying, we can do that, that means we're not going to do this other thing. It's not bad to make those changes or to add in the things in between, as long as you're intentional about it, and don't put your team on the hook to then try to deliver the thing that they were going to do anyway. All right, I think that's all the time I have. So I hope to see you at some other sessions. I will be joining one now that I'm really excited about. I think Audrey Crane is next, so that's where I'll be next. Have a great time.